Welcome to UFHL Now, a close-up look at the ultimate fantasy hockey league. The most realistic fantasy gameplay. High stakes, high reward. Here's your host, the owner of Duckman's domination in the UFHL, and the mighty Mallards of the UFAHL, Dean Millard.
Hello there, and welcome to episode 22 of UFHL Now, the show that covers off the greatest fantasy hockey league in the world. My name is Dean Millard, owner of Duckman's Domination, the Mighty Mallards, and affiliation with High Level Scouting. By the way, I will be divorced if I don't say this, but happy birthday to the owner of High Level Scouting, Trish Millard, celebrating another milestone today. Any time you can go another year living with me is certainly cause for celebration. So happy birthday to Trish. I'll try to spoil her later on as the day progresses. This show proudly being broadcast on the Ultimate Fantasy Sports Network. If you'd like to get involved, email UFSN at uffsports.com, or possibly you could check them out on Twitter at UFS Network. You can reach me at Ducks Domination on Twitter as well. But UFSN is building something special. If you want to get involved, if you have a fantasy show that you think is pretty cool that would work on our network, please check it out. Find UFSN on YouTube. Soon to be partnering with AO Sports. Some cool things are happening on the broadcast front. Okay, so on this show today, what we are going to be chatting about is some family. I'm going to talk about some family in a little bit. Also, we're going to talk about some sponsorship for the UFHL. Very, very cool news. Some trades and some breaking trades. Some trades you've seen, some trades you have not seen that we will announce during this show on the Insider segment. We'll have our futures auction news to tell you about, and we will also discuss what will be happening on the owners' meetings. But I want to talk about family a little bit on this show for right now. I just had a chance to, luckily, head back to Manitoba, God's country, and visit my family, particularly my dad, my older brother who's in the military, who just was posted back to Shiloh, Manitoba, where it all started for him 31 years ago, which is strange. But what started for me where we grew up was a love of hockey. And I had a chance to visit my dad this past weekend, as mentioned, in Manitoba. It was just, it was weird because we hadn't seen him in basically 2 years. And so we spent some time. I got him to put on the Duckman's Domination shirt. He's had to have some teeth removed recently, so he's got the hockey smile. And then him and I and my lovely wife Trish made a drive to the rink, East End Community Center, where I learned to skate, literally a block from the house I grew up in by the water tower in Brandon. So it was really important for me to spend time with the two most important people in my life, Trish and my father, and relive some great memories. So whenever you can, please do not take your family for granted. I probably did for a point of time in my life, and I try not to do it now. So it was really great to be with my family that I've been a part of for many, many years, my father my whole life, and Trish for the last 18. But also relive some memories. And now we have this new family here at UFSN, this family atmosphere. And like a true family, we don't always get along. Not everybody gets along in this giant UFFS and UFHL family that we have, and soon to be all these other leagues. But it is a new family for me and for a lot of people. I fight with some of my family members, and I get along with some of the other ones. And it's just something I thought would tie in a little bit. Like the Rugg and Lebowski will tie the room together with family. And speaking of family, there's always that one family member that knows everything about you. And you're like, how did they find this out? we're going to talk with that family member when we come back, as it's Larry Fisher, our UFHL insider. He always knows everything about everybody, and he'll fill us in, including some breaking news on a trade that I made very recently. Let's get to the UFHL insider now.
Time to get the scoop on the UFHL with our insider, Larry Fisher. He's had lines in the water all week long. What will he reel in for us today? Let's dive in and find out what's going on with the UFHL now.
Larry, it is great to be back chatting with you from the marsh here. I no longer am living out of a suitcase. I found out what it was like to be a Bentley Jack for a week. Living out of a suitcase, you're a Bentley Jack 1 minute, you're traded the next, here's your free luggage, and away you go. I was doing the hotel life, but always great to travel through Manitoba and Saskatchewan, but always better to get home and be talking about the UFHL and UFHL now. So I know it's been a crazy busy off season, and it doesn't even seem like there's been an off season in the UFHL, does it?
No, yeah, it's been busy, Dean. The NHL usually has a lull right now, kind of coming out of the NHL draft and that first week of free agency. And, once August long weekend hits, everybody takes a breather and it's a 3-week lull, but not in the UFHL. We've had some turnover in franchises, some new JMs, new management groups coming in. And obviously there's still a lot of time left in the offseason before October. They want to put their stamp on the roster. And so it's been steady movement coming out of the entry auction. We've had a number of blockbuster trades that we'll talk about today. And just in general, the Telegram groups are just as lively as always. And whenever some new blood comes into the league, Dean, it really seems to spark everyone. And so it's been another exciting, busy week. It wasn't slow at all. Even you think coming out of that long weekend, there might be a little bit of a slow start to the week, and we'd be scrambling for stuff to talk about. But we actually have more than enough to talk about this week, which is always nice.
Yeah, we might have to rename this show UFHL New because there's so much new stuff going on. And you talk about new blood. That is evident on the managerial side and the sponsorship side, which I think, bravo, congratulations to everybody at UFFS and UFHL who worked on this partnership, because it is awesome for everybody.
Yeah, it's exciting to announce, Dean, on behalf of the Ultimate Fantasy Hockey League, that Instat will be sponsoring the UFHL for the upcoming 21-22 season. And Instat came on board back in April, along with Elite Prospects and Fanalytica as our three sort of primary partners on the hockey platform. And we're thrilled with all three partnerships to date, Dean. Obviously, Elite Prospects has helped power all the player profiles. We wouldn't have the website platform that we have without Elite Prospects. So a big shout out to Peter Sibner and the team at Elite Prospects for helping there. But certainly Instat, Mark Yates and Ed Palumbo, they run the North American hockey side of Instat. And we met with them in April or in March, and they took an immediate interest to Ultimate Franchise Fantasy Sports at a higher level, at what is Scorecoin all about, and getting into the crypto world and learning the ins and outs there. And Mark really liked just taking it all in for a few months, right? And then Ed got involved right away as the head of scouting for Fanalytica, first as an independent scout, then the head of scouting for Fanalytica, Rob Love's agency. And Ed's actually, I think he's got the second most or the most prospects owned already just within a few months. So he's been busy as a scout and really saw the inner workings of the UFHL. And they obviously followed the entry auction closely to see how scout assets were transferred to owners and how that bidding went. And they liked everything they seen. They wanted to get more involved, and they wanted Instat to be more involved, because the initial partnership, Dean, was Instat was providing access to the platform at a discounted rate of $750 USD per UFHL user, UFFS user. So you could get into the hockey platform at Instat for $750 annual subscription, which was, about 25% of the going rate, or possibly, it was a real discount. I know the going rate's upwards of 3,000 or 3,500 USD. So it was already a big discount, but not everybody a handful of franchises and scouts took up memberships with Instat, but the vast majority were like, oh, that's still, sort of expensive, or it wasn't expected that opportunity was going to be there. So they didn't budget for it, kind of thing. And they were looking at getting it this coming season, but Instat stepped up, Mark and Ed, and said, you know what? We really like this league. We really like this platform. We love the professional fantasy sports. It's something we want to get into as a company, as Instat. And so they stepped up and actually provided free access to all the franchises. So GMs, their affiliated scouts, anybody who's got a staff role in UFFS with the hockey platform, with the UFHL, as well as the UFAHL, the AHL version league that we hope to get up and running for next season, not this coming one, but the year after. Everybody gets free access to their industry-leading tools for video scouting and data analysis. And I can tell you, Dean, a lot of those people that were on the fence as to whether or not to get a membership to Instat, a lot of them, as soon as that email went out saying, here's your free access, they went and tried it, and they are all thoroughly impressed, and they feel it's absolutely worth the going rate. So for people who aren't part of the UFHL, if you're not already a member at Instat, certainly it's something you should look into, because this is a service like no other as far as tracking, whether it's prospects or active players, as far as data and video goes. It's an impressive tool, and all the NHL scouts, every NHL team scouts uses Instat. It's the, like I said, the go-to resource for high level scouting, and certainly it's something that everybody involved in the UFHL now has access to. And what a perk! Join the UFHL, you can get access to Instat, which, like I said, costs a significant more if you're not part of the UFHL. So I think it's going to be a great partnership, and it's great to have Instat as the first title sponsor of the Ultimate Fantasy Hockey League.
Well, it's just one more thing that makes the UFHL the best league in the world. I mean, there is a specific show that people are watching right now about the league. We get incredible access to not only these products, but some of the brilliant minds that are involved in this platform as well. So it's amazing. And unfortunately, I didn't take enough hamsters to put in the internet wheel, so I haven't been able to dive into this. I didn't have a chance to dive into it on the road. I barely had enough hamsters to get the production up and running in the hotels I was at. So I can't wait to dive into this. I know I was telling Trish about it, and she gets to look at things a little bit more and be a little bit more involved in knowing what players' high-level scouting will be looking at and things like that. So there's some really cool things, and in a year where access to watching players was so limited, we're going the opposite way and getting so much access. So I'm really excited about diving into that, and I'm really excited that not only is Instat getting involved, but Mark and Ed really getting involved in the UFHL.
Yeah, they are diving in, like you said, Dean. They're now running the Dynasty franchise, the Instat team. They're the management team for Dynasty. And as you know, we introduced Mark on last week's show, Dean, as the associate general manager of the Monarchs franchise. But we also put a disclaimer in there that, as we're talking, the Dynasty franchise, Ryan Malone's franchise, has just had a vacancy for GM. And the way it worked out, Ryan connected with Mark and Ed and got on the phone and got talking. And there's only 32 jobs in the UFHL, Dean, just like the NHL. They're very coveted positions to be a GM and at the professional fantasy sports level. And so Ryan approached Mark with an offer, and it was an offer he couldn't refuse. So he went back to George and said, hey, this has come up. I have an opportunity to be hands-on GM with the Dynasty. I'd like to pursue that opportunity because, who knows when the next opportunity will come up, or the potential to work with a, former NHL player like Ryan Malone and be part of that franchise. It was a really good opportunity that Mark felt he couldn't pass up. And him and George did work out some small compensation to allow him to leave the Monarchs and go to Dynasty. But certainly George was happy having Mark as his associate GM. They were doing some good work with the Monarchs and getting Regal Sports Group up and running as an agency. But ultimately, I think every day Mark gets more involved and more into the UFHL. As you can tell, as we'll talk about some of his trades he's made already, him and Ed. But as they get more and more involved, they really wanted to take on a franchise of their own. So Ed became the affiliated scout. He's still head of scouting for Fanalytica.tech. And I believe there's going to be some sort of co-affiliation with the Tornadoes because Fanalytica is obviously a tool developed by Rob Love, who his dad, Rob Love Sr., owns the Tornadoes, and Rob Love Jr. is the GM there. So I think Ed will still have some affiliation with the Tornadoes as well as the Dynasty franchise going forward. But a great opportunity for both Ed and Mark, and something they couldn't pass up working with Ryan Malone. And I can tell you, Dean, they're busy and they're enjoying it. And one thing I was going through, Dean, looking at lists here too, and tracking the number of players that the Dynasty franchise has acquired by bringing on Ed Palumbo as well as their affiliated scout. Ed has 137 prospects. I think he registered one this morning, so it's 138 now. But Ariel Malone, who is formerly Azteca scouting with Brian Hernandez, those were the prospects that Xavier and Brian had acquired. Ryan purchased those as well in the sale of Dynasty, and his wife, Ariel Malone, took over those prospects. So there's 100 there. There's 137 with Ed. There's 42 with Dynasty as the UFHL franchise, and there's 21 more with the UFAHL affiliate Dawn Patrol. So you do the math, Dean, and it comes out to 300 players, total players in the pipeline for Dynasty. So Dynasty has access or dibs on 300 players in the UFHL right now. And obviously they only have a 23-man active roster and 50-man total roster, counting the 27-man protected list. But they have 300 players that are coming up the ranks that they essentially have the rights to or controlling interest of. So it's quite the group they're building there with the Dynasty franchise, with Ryan at the top, and then Ed and Mark, or Mark and Ed, the Instac team managing this franchise going forward. I think you're going to see Dynasty. They have some work to do with the salary cap, and stuff. But I think Ed and Mark are both experienced in the real world. Ryan obviously played the game at a high level. His dad was the head scout for Pittsburgh for a number of years and in management roles. They have a lot of connections. So I just see this as a great fit all around. And I think we're going to see Dynasty in the years to come, Dean, become one of these flagship franchises in the UFHL because of the people running the Dynasty going forward.
Interesting little talk of possible compensation there, because I'm not sure I agree with that. I think that, Duckman's domination never asked for or expected any compensation when we allowed George to leave as assistant GM to be a GM. I'm not sure I agree with asking for compensation when they just did that same situation and didn't give or were asked for any compensation. So not sure I'm really agreeing on that situation, but I am glad about Mark getting involved, especially because we got to work, Mark and I, on a pretty big deal right away.
Yeah, talk about a breaking blockbuster on UFHL Now this week, Dean, because as everybody knows, the 2024 first-round picks aren't on the platform yet, so they're traded via email. So nobody's seen this trade except the two franchises involved. But Duckman's, as I just mentioned, Dynasty had some salary cap issues. Duckman stepped in and was able to take some salary off because Duckman's has to get to the floor. So they acquired Jeff Skinner, who's obviously an undesirable contract in the present. Maybe he gets bought out. Maybe he gets traded somewhere and has a rejuvenation in the NHL. But for the time being, Duckmans can certainly afford to take on the Skinner contract. As well as TJ Brody. And Brody's a quality player still. He hasn't had a drop-off in Toronto and has a fair contract, not too high. But again, Dynasty's looking to shed some salary. But in order to take Jeff Skinner, Dynasty had to give up Martin Chromiak, who fell to the LA Kings in the 5th round, but probably close to a first-round talent, if not a first-round talent from last year's draft. One of these young Slovak players that are going to be leading Slovakia for the years to come, as well as that 2024 first-round pick in exchange for two quality prospects. Or Ryan Poehling obviously was a big World Junior star for the Americans a few years ago. Hasn't quite broke in yet at the NHL level. He did have a hat trick in his first ever NHL game, but then has spent time in the AHL and has battled some concussions and injuries and sort of hasn't established himself as a full-time NHLer yet. And Evan Vierling, who has a lot of upside as an Oilers 5th round pick, went in the same round as Chromiak. So it'll be interesting to see how Chromiak and Vierling develop. But certainly this is a trade that comes down to cap space needed for Dynasty, and Duckmans needs to reach the floor. And it was just a good match as far as I can see, Dean, as far as you being able to help them get out of cap trouble and at the same time help yourself ensure you're going to be at the floor for Duckmans.
Yeah, this trade helps us in 3 areas. It helps us get to the cap floor. We're above the cap floor now, as long as my math is correct on our own personal sheet. We'll be above the cap floor, so we're good. We've succeeded in what we needed to do. It helps us next year, particularly when we're making a push to compete and make the playoffs and win the Klein Cup. As TJ Brody gets added to our stable, and a guy is a top pairing blue liner on a very offensive team in Toronto, and the power play and things like that go along with that. And then, as you mentioned, Martin Chromiak is a guy that, we've had on our personal list of other teams' prospects for a while, and we get a pick. So it helps us in the present, the immediate future next year, and then going into 2024. And as I've said in the past on this show, we are prospect rich. And the other thing that this really allows me to do and our team to do is, we traded, we paid a lot for that first round pick in 2022 because we feel it's going to be high. And now we can have 2 top 5, top 6 picks in 2022. We wanted to do some shopping and we wanted to get to the cap. And now that I'm at the above the floor, or not to the cap, we wanted to get to the floor, I can be really picky. And, there are some teams that maybe aren't happy with the prospects we're offering now and the prospects, the things that we're asking for in the trades. But that's because this is the one and few benefit of sucking and having a lot of cap space is you get to be in the driver's seat in some of these, because I don't need the players that in particularly that these teams are wanting to get rid of. In fact, nobody needs these players that these teams are wanting to get rid of in some of these negotiations. So we are going to be stingy. We are going to be hard to deal with in these negotiations. And if it doesn't get done this year, then we do it next year. We do it mid-season. We are not in any rush. We have already said we are planning to be a lottery team this year. We don't need to fill all our spots. We did some stuff in free agency, and we're doing some stuff in trades. We've got some guys on the Mighty Mallards that can jump up. We are in a very comfortable position, so we are willing to take on more cap, but it's going to cost teams. As I said to one GM who thought the price was high, I said, cap space is expensive. If you want to bring in somebody else on your team to make yourself better because of that, $8 million player or whatever it is isn't doing well, you got to pay for that. Cap space is expensive, and it will be when it comes to us. So that's the first of our moves. We've got a lot more balls that we're juggling and people that we're talking with, but we were able to bring on that Jeff Skinner contract, thinking that this guy will get bought out. I cannot see the Buffalo Sabres continuing on with that contract for as long as it is. Or, as you mentioned, maybe he rejuvenates. I don't know if he'll ever live up to that contract at all, but if there is something. And the other thing is there's also a buyout period. We won't be buying him out this year, but, if he's not bought out by the Sabres and signs a new deal, which we can then walk away from if we want to, we will look at the buyout options next year. But the flexibility of sucking gave us these opportunities to make these deals and be really stingy with other ones. And you hope, Larry, that you're not in this. Like, I do not want to be the Arizona Coyotes. I do not want to be the Decade of Darkness Edmonton Oilers. I want this rebuild to be, on target, like you're building a building, and then, you stay on target and you don't have to dip back into this where you're taking on contracts again. Hopefully this is like a one and only thing for our franchise.
Yeah, and I think you nailed it with the cap space. You have to pay a premium to lose a player because we mirror not only the ceiling but the floor, and everybody's got to be within that $21.5 million from the top franchise to the bottom franchise. And I think any movement of big contracts without money coming back, as this case, they only took back less than $2 million total, and guys that aren't even going to be on the active roster. So basically, just shed Brody and Skinner at a combined almost $15 million off the books. If you're going to do that, and one of the players is perceived to have negative value as Skinner does, you're going to have to put in some significant sweeteners. No different than why hasn't the Buffalo Sabres traded Jeff Skinner in the NHL?
Right.
Well, if anybody's taking on Jeff Skinner's contract in the NHL, you're going to be adding a lot to that package. Okay, you guys want to move Jeff Skinner? Well, you got to throw in Rasmus Dahlin or, one of these other, Dylan Cousins or something. You got to throw in somebody significant to get the attention, as well as that first round pick or whatever. And like I said, Dean, the fact you guys moved the 2023 Duckman's Domination first round pick and a number of picks, 2 first round picks in 2023, including the Godfathers, in order to acquire the Blizzard 2022 second round or first round pick. It's nice to add another first round pick for the future. And obviously you can flip that 2024 first round pick of Dynasty down the road for another asset that can help in the present when 2024 comes and Duckmans wants to contend or compete. There's a chip for you at the trade deadline or the offseason to bring in another ringer. And the Jeff Skinner situation, I think you're right. I think that will take care of itself over time. Whether, put it this way, if he has another 2 or 3 bad years the way they are, the way he's been playing, I think, and nobody's willing to take him trade-wise, I think Buffalo will have to bite the bullet and buy him out, and then you'll get him at wherever he signs at his new contract, or you can release him at that time. Another thing to consider, I think, is that, you're not going to be, Duckmans isn't going to be the only rebuilding team ever in the UFHL. 2 years from now, when Duckmans really wants to go for it, somebody else is going to want to blow it up and need to reach the floor. And that team will gladly take Skinner with maybe a sweetener to let you guys progress further up the standings and become contenders. Somebody else will want to be rebuilding and blowing it up. And there'll always be a team that needs that big cap hit to reach the floor. And I think those cap hits move a little more in fantasy than real life, because in real life, you're dealing with real people and families and commitments and all the rest, right? But you don't have any commitment to Jeff Skinner and his family to keep him in Buffalo or whatever the case. And I mean, I'm sure he's got a no trade clause to some extent in the NHL where he can sort of pick his spot if they are trying to move him. So I think, or actually I think he has a no move clause in the NHL where that doesn't apply to trades in the UFHL, because obviously you can't personally phone up Jeff Skinner and ask him if he's willing to accept a trade in the UFHL. So the no move clause doesn't help him here. So I do think those big cap hits move a lot more in fantasy, because there's always going to be somebody wanting to rebuild and needing that cap hit to reach the floor, which allows them to tear down that much further and add that many more prospects. So I think, Dynasty needed to get rid of Jeff Skinner in order to take a step forward. But for Duckmans, I think there's always going to be a market for Jeff Skinner going forward when Duckmans gets to that 22-23 season. They're ready to start climbing the standings, and you no longer need a $9 million Jeff Skinner if he's not playing, if he's not producing in the NHL. Somebody is going to want that contract to reach the floor so they can tear it down on their end and move some of their big money guys. So I think the deal will be win-win in this situation. I think Dynasty accomplished what they needed to do to have some breathing room from the cap ceiling, and now Sergei Bobrovsky isn't such an anchor because they have that cap flexibility. And as you will see here, Dean, they made some other moves to shed additional cap space. But I think it's going to turn out to be a win-win, and I don't think Duckmans will be stuck with Jeff Skinner forever. I think another franchise will take him in fantasy when they need the cap bump to get to the floor.
Well, he does have a no movement clause for every year of his contract. So it was also important to make this deal after expansion. Even though we didn't have the greatest of players, this was a contract nobody was trading for before expansion, because then it takes up another slot. And that's not the only kind of breaking news. I didn't even have time to make up this graphic, but you have another trade to break here as UFHL Insider.
Yeah, it's nice not having the 2024 draft picks on the platform, Dean. Now we get to have some breaking news, because 2 of the 2024 first-round picks have moved this week since we made them available via submitting to the commissioner. One was obviously the trade we just talked about with Duckmans and Dynasty, and the second 2024 first-round pick is on the move from West Coast Express to the Titans in exchange for Mike Hoffman. So it's Mike Hoffman to West Coast Express in exchange for defense prospect Riley Walsh and 2024 first round pick from West Coast Express to the Titans. So 2 trades we get to break today on today's show, which is always fun to do. And that trade, again, I think West Coast Express moved some money off to sort of reevaluate this offseason And now they have cap space, and they're looking at bringing in Mike Hoffman in Montreal, that they see he's going to replace Thomas Tatar there and maybe play up the lineup. You got Tyler Toffoli on one side and Mike Hoffman on the other. You got some goal scorers. And one thing Mike Hoffman's always been is a volume shooter. He's not afraid to shoot the puck, and certainly shots count in the UFHL. So West Coast Express adds another top 6 forward to their roster without losing anybody current. And I think Riley Walsh is a quality defense prospect. I think he was viewed a little higher. His status was coming out of college a couple of years ago than maybe it is now, especially with New Jersey adding, guys like Ryan Graves and Dougie Hamilton and Ty Smith's emergence. And, maybe there's not room for Riley Smith there this year, Riley Walsh there this year. But I think Riley Walsh is still a quality defense prospect. And the Titans get a 2024 first-round pick. And the Titans are one of those franchises, Dean, as you see these contracts getting signed. Cale Makar, $9 million. He went from $1 million to $9 million. So the Titans are still trying to give themselves some cap flexibility. So they move a Mike Hoffman out. And again, it's largely a cap move to allow Titans some flexibility now to perhaps add a different player to keep them in that top 5 of the UFHL standings in the coming season.
So those are two of the trades that viewers didn't know about, but there's been lots of activity. I don't think there is such a thing of the dog days of summer in the UFHL. I mean, UFHL is 12 months a year, as we're seeing. I mean, this is supposed to be the lull. This is supposed to be the kind of the calm before the training camp storm. Well, it's just raging 12 months a year in the UFHL.
And again, I think largely because of the new blood that's coming in, Dean. I think whenever there's management changes and stuff, everybody wants to put their stamp on a team. So there's actually been 13 trades over the last week throughout the August long weekend in Canada, and then this leading up to today. So 13 trades over the week, including 4 involving Dynasty's new management team. So Dynasty, Mark and Ed have really come in, and Ryan is a big influence. He's involved in these trade talks and certainly wants his say in the roster as well. But they've come in and really shook things up with their 4 trades. And here you can see, Dean, the players coming in, the players going out. So they've brought in 9 new faces. They've shipped out 10 players and the 2024 draft picks. So quite the shakeup when you think about it. 9 players coming in. That's almost half your 23-man roster. Guys like Charlie Coyle, Casey Cizikas, Braden McNabb, Andy Green, Caleb Jones. Funny that the Jones brothers were on the same team in the UFHL, and they both got moved this week to different teams after they were united in the NHL with Chicago. So that was kind of funny. But you look at the guys they moved out, Jeff Skinner, Marcus Johansson, who actually just signed in Seattle after they had moved him out. Guys like Justin Falk, who's another $6.5 million cap hit on the blue line, TJ Brody. I believe he's at 5.5. Alex Goligoski at $5 million. So between Skinner and those 3 defensemen and Marcus Johansson, his new deal, I think they moved out close to $25 million in cap space and probably brought back 10-ish. So I think they definitely accomplished the goal of not being over the cap and not being tight against the ceiling. Maybe on paper the quality of players leaving and the quality of players coming in, maybe a slight step back, but now they got the wiggle room, and now they can start identifying targets that maybe make 2 or 3 million more than the player they're offering, and they can bring those players into Dynasty. So all in all, a very busy first week on the job for Mark Yates as general manager of the Dynasty franchise. Certainly Ryan Malone can breathe a sigh of relief now that they're out of cap trouble, because that was sort of the big concern when Xavier and Brian left Dynasty. They were the reigning GMs of the year, but they had acquired some big contracts. Then Ryan Malone came in and acquired Steven Stamkos and Alex Killorn and brought in more money without sending much out. And all of a sudden they were over the cap, and other franchises knew it. And like you said, Dean, that cap space, if you're over the cap, nobody's going to do you huge favors. And that's why maybe you see some quality players going out for some slightly lesser replacements coming in. But now they're back in the game as far as not having to worry about the cap with every single move, and they can try to identify some targets and upgrade that roster going forward. And certainly they can build around their new franchise player in Steven Stamkos.
Well, there's just zero doubt they were going to have to take a step back in order to be able to, they had to they couldn't bring on any more players. They had to get rid of some of that dead weight, as they called it, and that now they can start making moves to fill that roster. But this roster, when Xavier and Brian looked at it, it was like, it was down here, and then they took it up to here, but they got to probably bring it back down to go forward again to get rid of some of that cap space, and that's going to be a process, but they're starting it right now, and the deal that they made with us, as you mentioned, we took on $9 million in Skinner, $5 million on Brody, and we gave up prospects that aren't even on their active roster. That's just straight cap coming off, and that's what you're going to have to do. But what about some of the other trades that happened? There are some really big name players for some big name potential prospects, especially in that one deal between the Stallions and the Stallions and the Royals.
Yeah, Dean, we could run through these kind of one at a time and just talk about them, because they just, that was probably the biggest trade of the week. Matthew Tkachuk from the Stallions to the Royals, along with prospect Vladislav Firstov, in exchange for Quinton Byfield and Denis Gurianov. So obviously the two big names there are Matthew Tkachuk for Quinton Byfield. And the funny thing here, Dean, is the Stallions general manager, Ian Constable, is a Flames fan. He loves Matthew Tkachuk. He's trading essentially his favorite player in Matthew Tkachuk from the Stallions to the Royals. Arnie Entz is probably Quinton Byfield's biggest supporter out there. I'm not the biggest Quinton Byfield fan, as evidenced by my draft rankings going into his draft year and some of the things I've said about Byfield over the years. I know he's got a high ceiling, but I wonder if he can actually get to that ceiling with some of his drive and determination, whether he has that in him, those characteristics. But Arnie's argued with me several times that Quinton Byfield's, he's a beast. He's going to be a huge force in the NHL, and sooner than later. So for Arnie to give up his prized prospect in Quinton Byfield and Ian Constable to give up his favorite player or best player from his favorite team in Matthew Tkachuk in the NHL in Calgary was quite the blockbuster swap. And I don't know what you thought when you seen it come down, but certainly some big names exchanged there.
Well, I thought the same thing, because at first I thought Ian was an Oilers fan because he kept drafting so many Oilers in the playoff draft, and then when I heard he traded Tkachuk, that would be like me trading Andy Moog, which just it's in my lifetime contract that I could never do that. But I found it interesting. Didn't the Royals just trade for Tim Stützle?
Yeah, they traded Bo and Byram for Tim Stützle. Yeah.
So they had Byfield, and they trade him, and they bring in Stützle, which was the kind of the big debate. So they've kind of done a bit of a 180. I like this trade for the Stallions. I'm excited about Quinton Byfield. I'm probably more excited about Tim Stützle, but I like Byfield and Gurianov, and Matthew Tkachuk, I think, is going to be a good player, but not to the ceiling that Brady Tkachuk is going to have. I think the Stallions did really good in this, and for the Royals, just another piece to plug in right now, where Byfield is definitely not going to have the same production that Matthew Tkachuk is going to have. So teams in kind of different spots filling the holes that they need to fill. So I thought that was interesting that the Royals, though, big fans of Byfield, but they get Stützle and end up trading Byfield. So I thought that kind of connection was interesting.
Yeah, it's funny how that played out. And certainly Matthew Tkachuk, as we always talk about, he's one of those guys that hits every category in the UFHL with PIMs and shots and hits and everything. So I think his role, his value in the UFHL is just as high as the real world. But Quinton Byfield's ceiling is that he could be, Anze Kopitar or better, if Jenny Malkin type centerman, if he reaches his peak potential in the NHL, and he's developing in a great system in LA where they have tons of prospects coming, and that's going to be a franchise on the rise in the NHL, and Byfield should be a big part of that. So I think you're right. I think as for next season, likely Matthew Tkachuk on the Royals is a big boost, and the Royals get that much closer to winning the Howe division or coming out on top in the Howe division. It's a big ad for them for next season, but looking 2-3 years down the road, I think that trade could definitely flip in the Stallions' favor, especially you're getting Quinton Byfield on an entry-level contract. Matthew Tkachuk could be making $10 million here pretty soon. So I think, or he's making $7 million already. So I think getting a cheap Quinton Byfield is big for the Stallions. And then the other big trade that blew me away, Dean, was Victor Hedman. This is George now. He's new with the Monarchs. He wants to put his stamp on the roster. So here's one of his first big blockbusters. He traded Victor Hedman along with Colton Sissons and prospect Gage Goncalves from the Monarchs to the Mystics for Seth Jones, Ethan Bear, Colton Skevier, and 200 score coins. So the big names there are the big blue liners. Victor Hedman for Seth Jones. As mentioned, Colin Mills, the GM of the Mystics, he had Seth Jones and Caleb Jones. He acquired them last season. Well, actually, Colin Mills wasn't the GM last season. Derek Keller, the owner, was running the franchise. But Colin Mills came in and inherited a roster that had the Jones brothers. And, of course, this offseason in the NHL, they're reunited in Chicago. Chicago brings in both Jones brothers. And you think it's a cool storyline. Hey, look, the Jones brothers are on the same team, both the NHL and the UFHL. Well, lo and behold, a week later, the Jones brothers are going in opposite directions. Caleb to the Dynasty, and certainly Seth Jones in this blockbuster to the Monarchs for Victor Hedman. And as we know, Dean, the Monarchs, when Ashley Murray, the original owner, it was largely the Tampa Bay Lightning. They had, 8, 9 Tampa Bay players. They had, Victor Hedman. They had Nikita Kucherov were sort of those were their two franchise players, Hedman and Kucherov. And the Monarchs had already traded away Alex Killorn. George did earlier. Now they've traded away Hedman, and they might only have 2 or 3 Tampa players left there. Anthony Cirelli and Nikita Kucherov, I think, are the only ones left possibly. So quite the change. And again, it's this new management comes in. You want to put your stamp on both George with the Monarchs and Colin with the Mystics. They wanted to shake things up. So Hedman for Seth Jones, it doesn't get much bigger of a shakeup than that.
Yeah, this trade baffled me a little bit, and this is just my opinion, but I'm never a fan of not getting the best player and getting a more expensive player, because I think Victor Hedman is the best player in this trade, and he's going to be making over $2 million or something like that less than Seth Jones' new deal, I believe. I think Hedman, last time I looked, was like at just under $8 million. So I like Hedman in this deal going to the Mystics. I like Seth Jones a lot as a player, but I just like Victor Hedman better, especially because he's making less money. Ethan Bear is definitely a pickup for the Monarchs. I'm not as big. I was never as big on the Ethan Bear, Caleb Jones fandom in Edmonton. I thought they were both could be good, number 5, 4 defensemen, but I'm not sure Ethan Bear is going to be a top 2 defenseman, in my opinion. But certainly I think he can be a good second pair. So the combination of Seth Jones and Ethan Bear is pretty good. I just like Victor Hedman at a lesser cap hit than anybody else in the trade. So if I was grading it, I would probably rather be the Mystics. But for George to pick up Seth Jones and Ethan Bear, two guys that easily can play in your top 4, even if Bear ends up as a number 4, it's a pretty good trade. And then there's some SCO in there as well. So big blue liners, and as you said, you put your stamp on it. Maybe there's other things that George is looking at and things like that. So gets quality defensemen, but I like Hedman at a lower cap hit overall.
I tend to agree, Dean. If you're looking for that franchise player, I think you're looking at Victor Hedman. I do think Seth Jones could get to that level. I think a change of scenery out of Columbus. I think he'll thrive in Chicago. Especially, it looks like Chicago is going to go for it again, bringing in Fleury and hopefully having Jonathan Taves healthy. And I think Seth Jones could ride. I think there's another level to Seth Jones's game, whereas you look at the big contracts around the league, Darnell Nurse and Edmonton. I think Darnell Nurse, the season he just had was sort of his high level. I think he'll have a tough time maintaining the season he just had, and I don't think he's got another level. I do think Seth Jones can take it up a notch yet and maybe get to that Victor Hedman level, but you're right. As of today, the best player in the deal is Victor Hedman, and he's got the better cap hit, and he's more marketable, 2-time Stanley Cup champion. Conn Smythe Trophy winner, all the rest, right? Norris Trophy winner. I think Victor Hedman is the big name guy there, but I think you also hit the nail on the head that the Monarchs are looking at getting a little bit deeper on the blue line and getting the second and third best players in the deal versus the first best player by adding Ethan Bear as well and getting another spot filled on their blue line and hoping that between Bear and Jones they can outproduce and bring more value than strictly Victor Hedman alone. And one thing to note there, Dean, is that Victor Hedman played the playoffs hurt. Tampa Bay hasn't announced any surgery yet, but we saw what they did with Nikita Kucherov, sitting him out the entire year. There's a lot of speculation Victor Hedman might be starting the season on the long-term injury reserve. and getting some surgeries done, whether it's hips or shoulders or knees or, he's a guy that logs a lot of minutes. He plays, he's not a real physical guy, but he's just such a big bodied guy that, he has a lot more contact in his game than people realize. And I think he's got some banged up body parts. So I think the Monarchs might have identified that as well, that maybe this is a player we're not going to have in the first half of the fantasy season. He might be going under the knife. So if you're looking at next year, maybe Hedman on the shelf, maybe you want Seth Jones instead. So I think there's lots of factors moving there, Dean. But one other franchise that this will be no surprise to you, Dean, that was busy this past week, the Bentley Jacks. They're at it again. They made 2 or 3 more trades. The big trade was they acquired Kalen Addison, a 2023 first-round pick, and 2 2022 second-round picks from the Gators in exchange for Alex Bure-Boulay, Eric Robinson, Scott Perunovich, and Josh Brook. So again, they're trying to shed some bodies that maybe weren't going to make their opening night roster. You don't want to lose Alex Bure-Boulay or Eric Robinson on waivers. Both are waiver eligible. They likely wouldn't sneak through. A team like Duckmans would love to have Alex Bure-Boulay come join them through a waiver claim or waiver auction. So I think they identified that. And certainly the Gators, they took a look at that deal, Matt Gunn, and said, Yanni Gord's in Seattle, Tyler Johnson's in Chicago. There's some opportunity here in Tampa next season for guys to step up into that top 9 or certainly become a regular. And one thing we know from Tampa over the years, whether it's Jonathan Marchessault or Yanni Gord, is there's always a next man up mentality there. They have such a good feeder system thanks to Al Murray and Steve Yzerman when he was there, and now Julian Brisebois, but they have somebody coming. And I think Alex Bure-Boulay is sort of the next man up there. He's going to get an opportunity to probably play in the top 9 or certainly a good role on the 4th line and a chance to produce. And he's produced at every level so far. So he was identified as a target by the Gators. And I believe Kalen Addison obviously was identified by the Bentley Jacks as a guy who could be quarterbacking the Minnesota power play in whether it's next season or a couple of years. He's a guy that has a real offensive mind from defense. And at the same point, the Gators are getting Scott Perunovich, who's a very similar player to Kalen Addison. Skill set wise, he could be quarterbacking or helping Torrey Krug quarterback that St. Louis power play in a couple of years, if not next season. So some offensive-minded defense prospects swapped with Addison and Perunovich, and then certainly some picks going to the Bentley Jacks, recouping futures in exchange for guys that might not make the roster in Bure-Boulay and Eric Robinson.
Well, and that's something they didn't have a lot of was picks. They sent out a lot of whether it was their own, so collecting some different picks in that regard, and filling up that. What they had was an abundance of bodies, and I think that's pretty good to get. They did trade some quality. They're not just throwing bodies at teams. So again, to be able to get rid of players. Because you either have too much or too much money, you have to pay, and they paid some quality for that. And they weren't done in that situation. More guys that they picked up in expansion on their way out.
Yeah, 2 more to the Red Army, actually. They've traded Dan Vladar, who obviously went from Boston to Calgary in the NHL. He'll be backing up Jacob Markstrom in Calgary. Dan Vladar and Dylan Gambrell, who, you're right, were both expansion draft picks for the Bentley Jacks, are on their way to Red Army for 2 prospects, Dean, that I was really high on in last year's 2020 draft. I had them ranked as first-round talents. Neither of them went in the first round. One went in the second round. One fell all the way to the 7th round. But Alexander Pashin, undersized Russian forward who dominated the Hlinka Gretzky Cup or Gretzky Hlinka Cup 2 years ago. And William Wallander, big, smooth skating Finnish defenseman. Not that much different than the Detroit picked him last year's draft in the second round. He's not that much different than Simon Edvinsson, who Detroit picked in the top 5 or top 10 this year's draft. I think that shows how much deeper last year's draft was than this year. But William Wallander is sort of that same cut from the same mold. And then 2023 second round pick. So the Bentley Jacks gave up Daniel Vladar and Dylan Gambrell to Red Army for Alexander Pashin, William Wallander, and a 2023 second round pick. So I think Pashin and Wallander are long-term projects. They're not going to be in the NHL next year or the year after. But for the Bentley Jacks, you hope Pashin is that next Artemi Panarin or Kirill Kaprizov or Nikita Gusev, whoever, these Russians that come over in their mid-20s. I think he has the potential to be that type of player. And Wallander, a good prospect for the future, whereas Red Army, they're trying to build out their depth because they have a lot of youth. Right now their only goaltender is Igor Shesterkin. That's on the NHL roster. They have Keith Kincaid that they brought up for the expansion draft, but he won't be with the Rangers because obviously the Rangers have Shesterkin and Georgiev. So they needed a backup goalie that's actually going to be in the NHL next season. So Daniel Vlader is a good fit there for Red Army. And Dylan Gambrell, just another depth guy because Luc Grenier, on his way out of ownership with Red Army, traded away 13 roster players, mostly for score coin and some futures back. So they need to recoup some of those bodies. And Dylan Gambrell will play a depth role for Red Army. But that was the other decent-sized move that the Bentley Jacks made this week, Dean. And then other names that were on the move around the league, we can just run through the list. But Jacob Slavin, who we just talked about, shorthanded time on ice could add some value there, and blocked shots certainly would add value if the UFHL franchises bring in those two categories for next season. But Jacob Slavin from the Gators to the Royals. So the Royals were busy this week. Obviously, they get Matthew Tkachuk as well as Jacob Slavin. They're looking to make a run in the Howe division. Blake Coleman went from Rock Republic to the Blizzard for two good prospects. Connor Zary, formerly of Duckman's Domination, and Zachary Larehu, first-round pick for Nashville in this year's draft. And then the Blizzard also swapped a previous first-round pick for the Winnipeg Jets, Christian Vesalainen, for Jeremy Lozon from the Outlaws. So as you can see, there is some good, fair trades throughout the league. And that's the thing about the UFHL, Dean, is you're not going to take advantage of too many franchises at any time. So you may as well not even start with the lowball offers. This is professional fantasy sports, and all these franchises, the owners, the GMs, the scouts, they know their talent, they know their hockey, and that's why you see these trades and you come away saying, yeah, maybe that team won, but generally they're pretty even, kind of like the NHL. You don't see, whereas other fantasy leagues, you're going to see people get taken advantage of where it's like, wow, how did they make that trade? That's terrible, right? That team just fleeced somebody. You don't see many fleecings in the UFHL. It's usually quality hockey deals, and no different with the rundown of trades. 13 trades over the past week in the Ultimate Fantasy Hockey League.
And you never know what else that team has in their pocket that they may be making as kind of a domino effect in that deal. We also had the free agent auction recap where, we certainly did some buying as Duckman's Domination to fill out some roster spots, with an eye to a few future deals. But that's the thing. There are teams that can go out and buy some of these free agents. There's still a buyout window if you absolutely do need to get rid of a contract or something like that. But I thought there was going to be less spending in the free agent auction. I was actually surprised at, and happy for the prize pool that some of these players went for as much as they did. Some of the players I wasn't interested in, that's for sure. Not interested in paying that much.
Yeah, there were some bidding wars for guys like Philip Deneau and Jamie Alexiak, and even guys like Luke Shen got a bidding war, Dean. But yeah, I was a bit surprised too, because in last year's free agent auction, as you remember, coming into this season, the vast majority of players went without bids. They were left there. Nobody had room for them, or nobody wanted them because they were perceived to have negative value or bad contracts or whatever. But this year, the UFHL wanted to more so mirror the NHL, do a free agent frenzy, put all the players up for auction on the same day. Anybody that franchises had released that were pending UFAs or they didn't like their new contract, you have a 24-hour window to release the player. So there was a good number. I think there was 22 players available. I think 20 of them or 17 of them, I think, actually sold in the free agent auction. But you're right, that was more than I maybe expected, and some of them certainly went higher, the bidding wars. But the eliminators emerged as the big spenders, Dean. Luke Schonwise, and he addressed it on Telegram. He said, you know what, I'm a new dad. I got a newborn kid at home. I don't have a lot of time. I'm busy with work to sit and negotiate trades. So this was an opportunity for me to bring in some NHL caliber talent across the board and do my spending in free agency, which obviously some NHL teams prefer to spend in free agency versus working the phone lines 24/7 as well for the right trade fit. But he landed, his big fish was Philip Deneau, obviously, who got a 6-year, $5.5 million cap hit with Los Angeles Kings as sort of their future number 3 center. But Eliminators actually brought in 5 players, Dean. The other ones weren't as big a names, brought in some cap space to make sure they're at the floor too, with guys like Kyle Okposo. He's got 2 years left at 6 point something million. The hope there, maybe, new coach in Buffalo, Granato's there. Maybe you hope that the new coach can rejuvenate Jeff Skinner and Kyle Okposo, maybe put them on the same line or something, get them going. But yeah, so certainly Kyle Okposo you take on as a cap situation to make sure you're at the floor. And then Philip Deneau is a guy that they're obviously hoping for production from. Going down the listing, the Snipers landed the big rig, not Patrick Maroon, but Jamie Oleksiak. They both are battling for the same nickname, but Oleksiak obviously got a pretty big contract in Seattle with the expansion Kraken. He's going to be one of the faces of the franchise there. I believe he got 6 years at $4.6 million. So the Ice Vikings addressed that as too rich for their cap situation. They released him, and the Snipers swooped in and got Jamie Oleksiak. The Generals got their guy. They put up a big bid, a starting bid, to solidify their D with Cody Ceci. And that's something we're going to see, I think, in the futures auction we're going to talk about too, Dean. Whether the bidding just goes in $5 increments, or somebody says, you know what, this is what I'm willing to spend on this player. Let's not waste everybody's time. Here's $175 for Cody Ceci. If you want to go higher, go higher. Otherwise, I'm taking him at that price. Here's my price. I like that move by the Generals. I hope we see some of that in the futures auction to speed up the bidding or jump the bidding into a range where the player is valued, because it could take all day if everybody's bidding from a starting price of $20 all the way up to thousands in case of the futures auction. But yeah, so then from the Generals getting their guy with CC, Duckman's nomination filled some depth holes, as you sort of addressed. You add some character guys. You get Sean Corelli, Mark Stahl, and Nate Thompson. They could all potentially wear letters for Duckmans, or be those leadership type guys, and still help contribute some fantasy points, and certainly allow your prospects to stay on the protected list, and like Ken Holland likes to do, over ripen them down on the protected list before you have to put them in the lineup, and keeps you a lottery team as well potentially. Luke Shen was a surprising release from the Crypto Knights, because Sharice Schultz, obviously the owner of the Crypto Knights, big Luke Shen fan from his Kelowna Rockets days, and then he's back in BC with a bunch of former Rockets with the Vancouver Canucks. They chose to release him, and he did get a bidding war at $850,000 cap hit for 2 years, pretty cheap. He's probably going to be the 6, 7, 8 guy in Vancouver, but another one of those guys that gets a lot of penalty minutes, like Jamie Oleksiak. So the Bentley Jacks stepped up and won that bidding war for Luke Shen. And then two guys that were also hot commodities, got some bidding going, was Casper Bjorkqvist, the Pittsburgh Penguins forward prospect to the Grizzlies, and Darren Helm ending up in Colorado. That's a nice spot to play versus Detroit. So West Coast Express stepped up and took Darren Helm. But a fun event as the free agent frenzy. Once we got the technical difficulties figured out, I think it went over quite well. And like I said, there was a nice bump for the prize pool. It was another good boost for the 2022 UFHL prize pool for all the franchises.
Yeah, that was quite interesting. Kudos to everybody who put that together. I like the free agent frenzy, where it just one player. It kind of sort of reflects as soon as the gates open and you hear some trades trickling. So I really enjoyed it. I liked it, and great for everybody for all the hard work that everybody did to make sure that went off. And let's hope that all the hard work you guys have been doing, and all the meetings that you guys have been working on, and the tests you guys have been doing works out well for the future auctions slated for tomorrow.
Yeah, knock on wood, Dean. This is going to be third time is the charm. We're going to debut our player auction tool for the futures auction on the UFFS platform, and it's going to work tomorrow. That's the plan. So only registered scouts can bid. You have to be a UFFS scout. So step one, you sign in as a scout at hockey.uffsports.com. Then you go to Marketplace, Auctions, and Upcoming, and it'll be there as the 2021 UFHL futures auction. Important to know that you're bidding in US dollars. Payments are in Scorecoin and SCO. And SCO will be pegged to the USD equivalent at the start of the auction, 4 p.m. Eastern on Sunday afternoon. Couple other things, Dean, that I think are important to know is that when you get into the auction room, you're going to see your available balance, which is your score coin in your wallet. Just ignore that. That's going to be for future auctions going forward when there's proof of funds bidding. It shows up there, but as you're bidding, it won't go down. And if you win a bid, it's not going to change. So you're bidding in USD. Your wallet's not going to be impacted. The payments will still be manually the same way they were for the the entry auction and the free agent auction. So you'll be bidding freely, and then you'll have to come up with the money afterwards and do the payment in Scorecoin. But if you see the available balance, don't worry. You don't need money in your wallet in order to bid, and you don't need to. Payments aren't processed at completion of auction. That will be the case in years to come and in months to come for other auctions. But as of tomorrow, you're just using it as a bidding tool, as our auction tool. So it should be a fun event, and hopefully the tech holds up. If not, Dean, we are prepared. We've already sent out the link to Air Auctioneer as a backup plan, but we're going with plan A. We're going to do the futures auction starting at 4 p.m. Eastern on the UFFS platform tomorrow. And like I said, knock on wood, hopefully everything will go the way it did in testing, and everybody will be happy. It'll be a fun auction. It's hard to say how long the auction will take, Dean. A lot of people ask that. Is this because it's a live event? Is it going to be 2 hours? Is it going to be 8 hours? It all depends on the bidding by the scouts, as we sort of addressed here just previously. If scouts bid aggressively and you got a guy like Cole Eiserman up, and every prospect, all 64 prospects start at $20. If everybody's going to go 20, 25, 30, all the way up on a guy like Cole Eiserman from $20 to, who knows where he goes. Connor Bedard was traded for $7,000 USD. So if you go from 20 to $7,000 USD in $5 increments, we're going to be there all day. If scouts say, you know what, I think Cole Eiserman's worth $2,000, I'm going to jump it to there and we'll take the bidding from there and see how high it goes, then you're going to be there a lot less time. It might be over in 2 to 3 hours versus 4 to 6 hours. So it's really going to depend on how the scouts bid and how aggressive or passive the bidding is as to the auction length. But every prospect will be put up for 1 minute, and there'll be a 30-second extension for bids in the final 30 seconds. That's how the clock will work. But yeah, certainly the more extensions you get, the longer the auction's going to go.
And when the auction ends, we turn our attention to Monday, when for some scouts the real fun begins. The futures auction, you've provided the 64 this year. This is the last year. Next year, it'll be up to the scouts to pick their own player that they want to take with that selection. And the open market, I mean, you must really love the open market process, especially the being as much work as it is. You get to really see sort of what the scouts are thinking. I mean, I remember the very first list we sent in, we did not understand it. And you were probably thinking, this is the list from a former GM in the NHL, but you get those lists and you can really see, because that's where, it's the rest. It's the best of the rest that weren't in those 64, and the scouting acumen really comes into play.
It does, Dean. And this year we're doing it all on the platform. So you're just going to, as a scout at noon Eastern on Monday morning, or noon on Monday, you're going to sign in as a scout. You're going to go register new player, and you're going to be able to register anybody that's 2024 draft eligible. So the birth date range is September 16th, 2005 up until September 15th, 2006. So any of those kids are eligible to be registered by scouts. It's first come, first serve, finders, keepers on the platform. So as opposed to sending in lists and processing a draft for now 52 scouts we have, Dean, it would take a week to get that list processed. So the scouts decided that they wanted only 64 prospects auctioned. So the rest are going to open market, and it'll be first come, first serve. I think, a large number of the scouts are going to have the exact same names on their list as we saw when I manually processed them. But what I saw and what we'll see again, I think here, is that outside of those top 64, everybody might have the next 40 names on their list, but they're not going to be in the same order. So when you go to register player A, somebody else is already registering player B. And then when you go to register player B, he's going to be taken. And I hope to process those live. So as they come in, I'll approve them, so everybody knows who's registering who as quickly as possible, so you don't have to enter the name to find out they're already gone. But I'll spend a few hours on Monday anyway processing the early wave of ads. But anybody who submits those ads prior to obviously the noon start time will be rejected, because I believe the platform will now allow you to register 2006 born players. If you submit prior to that, that will be rejected. So I'm starting 9 a.m. I'll be on the computer, and anyone that comes in after that will be approved and announced in a timely fashion. So that's how that'll work, but it'll all take place on the platform. That way the payments happen automatically. You don't have to submit any payments manually. So it'll hopefully be a smooth process, but certainly there'll be a lot of activity. And like I said, Dean, I can't wait to see what order these prospects get added and just how many get added on the first day, because I actually had it was a painful process to narrow down my futures auction list to 64 this year, because I had 106 names that I considered potential first round talents for this 2024 draft class. I think it's a pretty deep class. I think there's a lot of guys, particularly European guys, that I didn't see very much that I think could have been in that top 64. I know Jeff Ray and Mick Bortoni and those guys over in Europe must be licking their lips seeing some of the names I left out. So they'll be jumping on them. But there's also, the Shattuck St. Mary's team. I could have added, another 5 guys or certainly 2 or 3 more from there. Right in my own backyard, the Rink Academy here, there's probably 2 or 3 more guys there, that, including those twin brothers I mentioned, that I really wanted to get into the futures auction. So there's a lot of quality going to the open market, and it'll be interesting to see how fast they get scooped up and in what order, because like you said, I'm only one scout and it's hard to see every 14, 15-year-old player in the world. So I'm sure I'll learn a ton in this first week of open market as some of these names come in that I don't know. And then I get to go to Instat and research these names. So another shout out to Mark and Ed from Instat, as well as the Elite Prospects guys with, Rob Love and Fanalytica too. It'll be great to use our tools and our partners to research these players, because there'll be a lot of new names for everyone. And, I think I know a lot of hockey players, but as I've said, Dean, of the 4,000 that have been registered, there's probably almost 1,000 of them or 500 that I've had to go look up just to see who this player is and where they played and what did the scouts see in them, right? So I can't wait for the open market. It's my favorite part of the scouting. And like you said, next year when the futures auction changes and they announce their first overall pick in the futures auction, that's going to be even better, because I already have a list of about 50, I think it's at now, for 2025 eligibles that I like. And I can't wait to see, I'm not going to put that list out next year, and I can't wait to see what order our UFFS scouts have those prospects identified that I like for the 2025 draft. So first things first, the 2024 futures auction tomorrow on Sunday starting at 4 p.m. Eastern, and then the open market starting at noon Eastern on Monday for all 2024 eligibles.
Indeed. And then after that, it's the owners' off-season meetings that will become a big focus. And this is important for the owners who not only want to propose a potential rule change, but just discussion. I mean, if you look at some of the things that come out of owner meetings every year in the NHL, sometimes you don't hear about them again, or sometimes you hear about them for several years, and then it becomes an actual rule. So our owners' meetings, I just want to clarify for everybody, because I had to find out, not just for rule changes. If you want to talk about something potential, I'll be honest, I am going to table a discussion, as are maybe some other people. I would like to have starting a discussion about third-round picks, a possible third round in the UFHL. That doesn't mean I want that rule to go into play next year, but it also gives us an opportunity to table rule changes down the road and be able to do some research. I mean, you can't just say, let's bring this stat in. You have to bring the data with it. They don't just decide that, okay, we're going to do tag up offside again or not offside in the NHL. You have to bring the data. So this is important for people to make suggestions. But if they don't make any suggestions, this is what the meeting is going to sound like if there are no suggestions. Like nobody wants crickets at the meeting. So we need suggestions for these meetings, and the deadline is August 15th.
Yeah, we've heard a lot of great suggestions throughout the season, and just, you never know when a topic's going to come up on Telegram or even via DM. Hey, what do you think about doing this? And the answer is always, great idea. Submit it to take note of it and submit it to the off-season owners meeting. So we're hoping that if not all 32 franchises submit, we're hoping that a good number of them will submit. Like you said, Dean, you can table a topic or a proposed change. So if you think, there's going to be lots of discussion about draft picks. I know there's other franchises that are actually going to propose that we go down to just a first round and no longer have the second round. And then you're going to have franchises that are going to propose adding a third round. So there's going to be two different ideas there. But the nice thing with that specific topic, Dean, is even if it gets to a vote this year, which I'm not even sure it will, but it wouldn't come into play until 2024 at the earliest, because 2022 and 2023 draft picks have already been traded. You can't change those rules and add a third round or take away a second round when those picks have already been moving and have value. So that's why we're actually only adding the 2024 first round picks, not the 2024 second round picks, because we do believe a proposed change is coming to remove the second round starting in 2024. If that gets voted through, then it would be bad if we put the 2024 second round picks in tomorrow and everybody trades them and gets value for them, and then they don't count for anything. And if you acquired one, it's useless, right? So those 2024 second round picks wouldn't be added until after the owners' meetings, assuming that 22 don't vote in favor of removing the second round. But at the same time, I think that will be an ongoing discussion. If it gets voted down, it'll come up again next year. It'll come up again the year after. I think salary retention in trades is more so, like you said, an idea proposing a topic to be tabled versus an actual solid change of here's what I want to vote on. You could also say here's what I want to talk about now that we're all at the table. Because as we said, Dean, in our private conversation, is somebody puts out a good idea in Telegram at 2 p.m. on a Thursday. Well, there could be 100 responses, and somebody who works till 5 p.m. probably sees there's 200 messages and doesn't even, investigate what they're talking about. And this is a chance where you're going to get minutes. You're going to be at the meeting, whatever the case, to actually form an opinion on everything that's discussed. So certainly bring your proposed changes as well as your tabling of topics that you think the league should consider for the future.
And there it is. That's where you email the information, UFHL_commissioner@UFFsports.com. Don't just drop it in Telegram. It's like I say for the baseball picks on Sundays and different things. Those things get lost so easily in Telegram. If you want to make sure it's going to get to the right place, email the commissioner with what you want to talk about. And, maybe somebody already has it and it'll be on there. Maybe you have a tweak for it, but very important to get that in there. All right, man. So much going on. This segment was almost longer than some of our in-season segments. That's how much stuff is going on, but I absolutely love it. Larry, we'll be talking very shortly again because we got a pretty big UFFS podcast tomorrow with yourself and Darren. We're going to talk a little hoops as we get that set for the basketball auctions in September. And of course, then we have the futures auctions, and we'll be right back at it again next week. Thanks so much as always, Larry. Appreciate your time.
Thanks, Dean. Busy weekend, but looking forward to catching up again tomorrow on the basketball front.
You're watching the Ultimate Fantasy Sports Network, UFSN, your one-stop fantasy shop. Get in touch on Twitter at UFS Network. Email us, UFSN@UFFsports.com.
All right, that was a very busy show. I'll have to get a couple extra hamsters to make sure that this one gets uploaded and out in time for everybody. But don't forget, the futures auction is tomorrow. And here is just another reminder. You sign in as a scout at hockey.uffsports.com. You head to Marketplace, then Auctions, Upcoming, and hit the 2021 UFHL Futures Auction for scouts only. Bidding in US dollars, payments in SCO, and SEO pegged to the US dollar equivalent at the start of the auction. 4 p.m. Eastern is when all of that will get underway. All right, thank you so much to Larry Fisher and for you to watching the program. I always enjoy his segment for sure. Big weekend continues in the UFHL and then the open market, and then we'll see how many more trades continue to happen in this wonderful ecosystem that we do indeed have. Thank you very much for listening, watching, and being a part of the best league ever. We will talk to you again very soon. A special edition or a big edition of the UFFS podcast tomorrow with Darren Bates, Larry Fisher. We're going to talk a lot about what is going to go on with the hoops, the UFBA, and the auctions in September. Thanks, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. Happy birthday again, Trish.
UFHL Now is produced by DM Productions. To get in touch, head to www.podcastalley.ca.